Uruks are large soldier orcs, described as black orcs of great strength, who first appeared from Mordor in 3rd Age 2475 during the stewardship of Denethor I. The term Uruk originates from black speech meaning orc. In some contexts, Uruk functioned as a generic word for any orc, though it more commonly designated larger, stronger warrior orcs who dominated lesser breeds. Uruks demonstrated greater stature than typical orcs, though remaining shorter than men. Their builds exhibited robust physiques suited for sustained combat. Dark skin coloration characterized many Uruks, particularly those bred in Mordor. These orcs attacked Ithilien and destroyed Osgiliath's bridge and towers before Boromir, son of Denethor, drove them back in 2475. Around 3rd Age 2480, Sauron began populating Moria and establishing orc strongholds throughout the Misty Mountains using Uruk forces. In 2901, renewed Uruk attacks on Ithilien forced most remaining inhabitants to abandon the region. Dark or black skin pigmentation distinguished many of these warriors. They tolerated sunlight better than earlier orc breeds, enabling daylight military operations previously impossible for sun-weakened goblins. Uruks received superior equipment, including better armor and weapons compared to lesser orcs. Their gear reflected their status as elite fighting forces within orc armies. They served as soldiers, guards, and commanders throughout orc military structures. Larger Uruks often led bands of lesser orcs, maintaining control through physical dominance and intimidation. They referred to smaller, weaker orcs as Snaga, emphasizing hierarchical divisions. Uruks bearing the red eye of Sauron formed the core of Mordor's armies throughout the War of the Ring. They garrisoned key fortifications, including the Tower of Cirith Ungol, marched from Durthang toward the Black Gate, and comprised armies besieging Minas Tirith. During the Fellowship's passage through Moria, large Uruks accompanied the defending forces. A huge orc chieftain, nearly man-high clad in black mail, led the assault on the Chamber of Masarbal. After Sauron's defeat, Orcs of Mordor scattered without their master's coordinating will. Western forces cleared the Black Gate and surrounding regions of disorganized orc remnants. Many fled into eastern wastelands where their ultimate fate remains uncertain. Uruks represented the most formidable orc warriors, bred deliberately for warfare and capable of sustained military campaigns against the Free Peoples. Uruk-hai of Isengard began appearing around 3rd Age 2990 when Saruman started using and possibly breeding Uruk-hai to serve his ambitions. These fighting Uruks descended from Misty Mountain's orc populations and possibly incorporated degraded human stock through Saruman's breeding experiments. Isengard Uruk-hai demonstrated greater stature than lesser orcs while remaining shorter than men. They possessed swart skin, slant eyes, thick legs, and large hands. Their straight-legged builds contrasted with typical bow-legged orc frames. Saruman equipped his Uruk-hai with distinctive gear including straight, broad-bladed swords rather than curved scimitars, yew-bows matching those of men in construction, and iron helms marked with an S rune for Saruman. Their shields bore the white hand on black fields. These warriors tolerated sunlight, enabling unrestricted operations regardless of time. Treebeard noted that Saruman's orcs did not shrink from sun like traditional goblins, describing them as more like wicked men. Their endurance and discipline exceeded typical orc standards, though they remained subject to internal conflicts and factional tensions. The Uruk-hai band, commanded by Ugluk, slew Boromir at Amon Hen and captured Merry and Pippin. This force marched toward Isengard, demonstrating remarkable endurance, while pursued by Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. The war party included Isengard Uruk-hai Mordor orcs under Grishnok and northern goblins. Conflicts erupted between these factions over the captive's fate and proper allegiance, with Ugluk maintaining dominance through superior strength. When Rohirrim approached, Ugluk permitted northern orcs to flee into Fangorn while retaining prisoners. Eomer's Eord annihilated the entire party near Fangorn Forest. Thousands of Uruk-hai assaulted Helm's Deep alongside Dunlendings and lesser orcs forming the main assault force. Saruman deployed pikemen, swordsmen, and crossbowmen in coordinated waves against the fortress. Sappers breached the Deeping Wall's culvert with explosives, creating a critical breach in Rohan's defenses. Infantry stormed through this opening, threatening to overwhelm the defenders. The fortress walls and Hornburg witnessed fierce combat as Uruk-hai pressed their numerical advantage. Rohan's defenders held through desperate fighting until Gandalf arrived with reinforcements at dawn. The combined counterattack broke the Uruk-hai assault, scattering Saruman's forces. Subsequently, Treebeard and the Ents destroyed remaining Isengard forces during their march on Orthanc. The flooding of Isengard and systematic elimination of Saruman's army left few survivors. Some Uruk-hai accompanied Saruman into exile and later served as ruffians in the Shire before elimination during the Scouring. Half-orcs resulted from the crossbreeding of men with orcs, experiments Morgoth initiated in the First Age. Men under Morgoth's domination experienced degradation across generations until their minds and behavior became orc-like. Once sufficiently corrupted, these degraded men could be mated with orcs, producing new hybrid breeds. The process required systematic corruption, reducing men to near-orc mentality before crossbreeding became possible. This created creatures combining human and orcish traits in varying proportions. Saruman rediscovered these techniques during the late Third Age. Later accounts describe this as his wickedest deed, deliberately interbreeding orcs and men through similar degradation methods Morgoth had employed. He produced both men-orcs who retained more human characteristics and orc-men demonstrating more orcish traits. This systematic breeding program at Isengard created substantial hybrid populations serving his military ambitions. Half-orcs exhibited characteristics intermediate between the parent races. They appeared roughly man-height, sometimes exceeding typical orc dimensions. Sallow skin, squint eyes, and goblin-like facial features characterized their appearance. Some half-orcs could pass as particularly ugly men, enabling infiltration of human settlements. This capacity made them valuable for espionage and coordination with human allies like the Dunlendings. Unlike pure orcs, half-orcs tolerated sunlight without difficulty. This resistance to daylight enabled extended operations during all hours without the debilitation affecting sun-sensitive orc breeds. Half-orcs demonstrated enhanced cunning compared to typical orcs with greater capacity for strategic thinking and deception. These cognitive advantages made them useful beyond simple combat roles. The squint-eyed southerner from Dunland who appeared in Bree possibly represented a half-orc, though definitive identification remains uncertain. Half-orcs accompanied Dunlendings rallying to Saruman's banner at Isengard. Many participated in battles against Rohan, including the assault on Helm's Deep. After Isengard's destruction, survivors followed Saruman into exile. These half-orcs later formed the core of ruffian forces occupying and terrorizing the Shire. They established control through intimidation and violence, extracting resources from local hobbits. The ruffians maintained their occupation until Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin returned organizing resistance. During the Battle of Bywater and subsequent scouring of the Shire, local hobbits eliminated the ruffian forces, including remaining half-orcs. The breed likely vanished entirely following Saruman's final defeat and death at Bag End. Goblin-men were hybrid creatures Saruman bred at Isengard, blending traits of men and orcs through methods similar to those producing half-orcs. The precise difference between Goblin-men and half-orcs remains unclear from surviving accounts. Both breeds resulted from Saruman's crossbreeding experiments. Gambling at Helm's Deep explicitly mentioned both half-orcs and Goblin-men among Saruman's forces, suggesting distinct categories, though their exact differentiation escapes clear definition. Some speculation suggests Goblin-men possessed more pronounced orcish characteristics than half-orcs, representing different proportions of ancestral heritage. These creatures served Saruman in multiple capacities, including combat and infiltration operations. Unlike traditional orcs, Goblin-men tolerated sunlight, enabling unrestricted deployment. They fought alongside Uruk-hai, orcs, and Dunlendings during Saruman's campaigns against Rohan. Substantial numbers participated in battles, including Helm's Deep, where many died before the fortress walls or fell to Huorn attacks. Surviving Goblin-men scattered after Saruman's defeat. Some likely accompanied the wizard into exile, possibly serving among the Shire's ruffian forces, though specific documentation remains fragmentary regarding their ultimate disposition. Northern orcs and goblins inhabited the Misty Mountains and surrounding regions, maintaining elaborate stronghold networks throughout the range. The term goblin functioned essentially as a translation of orc, especially in the Hobbit's narrative. These designations referred to the same creatures, with goblins being the common speech term particularly used by hobbits, while orc represented the more formal nomenclature. These northern populations descended from Morgoth's orc remnants who fled into mountain refuges after their master's defeat in the War of Wrath. Major strongholds included Goblin Town beneath the High Pass, Mount Gundabad in the northern mountains, and eventually Moria after the dwarves' departure in 1981. Northern orcs dwelled in elaborate tunnel systems excavated over millennia. They demonstrated particular cruelty and ingenuity, inventing torture machines and developing ambush tactics against travelers. Their society emphasized violence, cunning, and survival through strength. Cultural memory extended remarkably far, with these orcs recognizing and hating Gondolin-forged blades, Orcrist, and Glamdring despite those weapons' ancient origins. These tribes maintained relative autonomy despite nominal Sauron allegiance. They established independent strongholds, conducting raids for personal gain rather than strategic objectives. Tribal structures persisted over millennia, with chieftains ruling through intimidation and violence. Northern Orcs recognized no central authority until Sauron's return compelled coordination. Even then, they frequently prioritized immediate concerns over strategic directives from distant masters. At Goblin Town, the Great Goblin commanded forces until Gandalf slew him during Thorin Oakenshield's company's capture and subsequent escape. This death contributed to Goblin mobilization for revenge. At Mount Gundabad, Bold gathered Orc forces from throughout the Misty Mountains and marched to Erebor upon learning of Smaug's death. The Battle of Five Armies resulted in catastrophic losses, with 3/4 of their entire host destroyed. Bolg himself fell during the engagement. Decades of weakness followed this defeat, with Misty Mountain's populations posing minimal organized threat. Around Third Age 2480, Sauron dispatched Orc hosts into the Misty Mountains to occupy abandoned Moria. Azog commanded this population when Thor attempted reclamation in 2790. Azog murdered Thror, initiating the War of Dwarves and Orcs. The campaign culminated at the Battle of Azanul Bazaar in 2799, where Dain Ironfoot slew Azog. Despite this victory, the Balrog's presence prevented dwarven reclamation. Moria orcs varied considerably in size, with some measuring comparable to typical northern orcs, while others demonstrated much greater stature. The band capturing Thorin's company from Goblin Town demonstrated typical northern behavior, with immediate violence and opportunistic cruelty. Northern goblins later joined Ugluk's mixed war party, though expressing desire to kill the hobbit captives and return home rather than serve distant masters' strategic interests. Northern orcs spoke various harsh dialects, with many knowing Westron, enabling basic communication between tribes, though cooperation remained limited. Sauron's return eventually brought renewed coordination. Northern goblins provided warriors for various campaigns, including forces at Moria and contingents in Saruman's operations. The Fellowship of the Ring encountered thousands of orcs occupying the ancient dwarven halls in January 3019. During the Chamber of Mazarbul fight, orcs clustered in passages and deployed cave trolls alongside their warriors. The Balrog's emergence scattered orcs, allowing the Fellowship's escape. After the War of the Ring, northern orc populations declined through military losses and Free People's campaigns. Following Sauron's defeat, Durin the Seventh eventually led dwarves reclaiming Moria in the Fourth Age, expelling remaining orc populations. Orcs of Mordor, comprising Sauron's armies, formed the largest orc concentrations during the Second and Third Ages across multiple strategic locations. After establishing Mordor around Second Age 1000, Sauron commanded countless orcs, continuing warfare against elves and men across millennia. These forces included both remnants from Morgoth's armies and orcs bred specifically in Mordor. Sauron systematically developed orc populations, creating formidable military capacity. Mordor orcs bore the red eye of Sauron on shields and equipment as their primary emblem. These forces varied considerably in size and capability. Common Mordor orcs served as basic infantry and laborers. Large Uruks formed elite units demonstrating exceptional strength and endurance. Equipment quality corresponded to rank, with elite warriors receiving superior armor and weapons, while lesser orcs utilized crude implements. During the War of the Last Alliance, Sauron dispatched orcs to ambush allied forces crossing the Misty Mountains, though the elves and men proved too strong, forcing orcs into hiding. Throughout the Third Age, Mordor orcs conducted continuous operations against Gondor. Uruks conquered Ithilien in 2040-75 and destroyed Osgiliath. In 2901, intensified attacks forced Ithilien's abandonment. During the War of the Ring, Mordor orcs formed Sauron's military bulk, garrisoning fortresses and comprising armies besieging Minas Tirith. At Minas Morgul, orcs operated under the Witch King of Angmar's direct command as Sauron's forward western staging area. These forces demonstrated enhanced discipline, reflecting the Witch King's oversight. Equipment included armor and weapons marked with Morgul identification, distinct from standard Barad-dûr forces. Thousands of orcs marched from Minas Morgul alongside the Witch King toward Minas Tirith, participating in the siege and subsequent Battle of the Pelennor Fields. The Witch King's death during this battle eliminated their primary command structure, though. Orcs continued fighting until Sauron's fall. At the Tower of Cirith Ungol, garrison orcs guarded the pass from Mordor into Gondor under Shagrat's command. This garrison utilized symbols of a white moon disfigured by a death's face, distinguishing them from other Mordor units. The garrison comprised both large Uruks and lesser orcs drawn from Mordor's forces, with equipment quality varying by rank. Internal factional conflict devastated this garrison after Frodo's capture in March 3019. Shagrat's Tower Orcs and Gorbag's Morgul company both claimed rights to the valuable mithril coat the Hobbit carried. Dispute over this treasure precipitated armed combat between the two orc companies, despite both serving Sauron. The fight escalated rapidly, with orcs from both sides killing each other in brutal melee throughout the tower's levels. Nearly the entire garrison perished in this fratricidal fighting. Gorbag, who commanded the Morgul company, died in the conflict along with most of his warriors. Shagrat survived, though severely wounded, and delivered the mithril coat to Barad-dur. He reported that rebel Uruk-hai had caused the incident, deflecting from the garrison's catastrophic internal collapse. Sam Gamgee encountered minimal resistance when he reached the tower to rescue Frodo. The sole surviving orc, called Snaga, temporarily held Frodo captive before Sam eliminated him. The Cirith Ungol incident demonstrated systemic weaknesses in orc organization. Despite serving the same master and facing common enemies, competing factions prioritized immediate material gain over strategic objectives. Internal conflicts between competing Mordor factions weakened effectiveness throughout Sauron's forces, illustrating how orc nature undermined even critical strategic positions when discipline failed and greed dominated. After Sauron's final defeat at Mount Doom, Western forces cleared orcs from the Blackgate region easily. Without their master's coordinating will, Mordor orcs fragmented completely. Many escaped into eastern wastelands where their ultimate fate remains uncertain, though organized resistance ceased entirely. Orcs of Isengard were standard northern orc forces Saruman assembled from Misty Mountain's tribes to supplement his bred Uruk-hai and hybrid creatures. These common orcs served Saruman's ambitions rather than Sauron directly creating factional tensions. Isengard orcs wore the white hand emblem distinguishing them from Mordor's red eye. Saruman's industrial capacity provided equipment superior to typical orc strongholds. These forces resembled other northern Misty Mountains populations in characteristics and capabilities. Saruman's Uruk-hai dominated militarily, relegating common orcs to support roles. Isengard orcs participated in raids against Rohan throughout the late Third Age, pillaging villages and drawing attention to growing threats. Saruman deployed these forces in the battles of the Fords of Isen, where Prince Theodred fell. Standard orcs joined Uruk-hai in the assault on Helm's Deep and participated in various military operations. Some Isengard orcs joined Ugluk's war party alongside Uruk-hai, Mordor orcs, and northern goblins in pursuing the Fellowship. Treebeard and the Ents destroyed Isengard's remaining orc population during their march on Orthanc. Those surviving accompanied Saruman into exile, with some serving among Shire ruffians. Eastern orcs inhabited regions beyond the Misty Mountains, including Rhûn and territories bordering Mordor's eastern frontiers, descending from populations fleeing after Morgoth's defeat. These orcs harassed dwarves and Northmen during the Second Age. The alliance of dwarves and men formed, partially responding to Eastern orc aggression. These coordinated defensive measures limited orc expansion, though failing to eliminate populations entirely. Eastern orcs conducted raids targeting isolated settlements and caravans. When Sauron established Mordor around Second Age 1000, Eastern orcs gradually fell under his authority. He supplemented these forces with orcs bred specifically in Mordor, creating combined armies. Eastern orcs provided local knowledge and established supply lines supporting Mordor's operations in eastern theaters. During the War of the Ring, Eastern orc populations contributed forces to Sauron's armies, though operating primarily in eastern campaigns rather than western theaters. Their specific roles in major battles remain poorly documented compared to Mordor and Misty Mountains forces. After Sauron's defeat, Eastern orcs likely scattered into wilderness areas, continuing existence as isolated tribes. Snaga is a contemptuous black speech term meaning slave or servant, used by larger Uroks when referring to lesser orcs. The designation appeared most commonly in Mordor and Isengard, where Uroks dominated smaller orcs through superior strength. Snaga functioned as a derogatory label rather than a formal classification applied to weaker orcs relegated to menial tasks. These lesser orcs performed labor supporting orc military operations, including mining, weapon forging, and supply transport, under compulsion from more powerful overseers. Lesser orcs, called Snaga by their superiors, demonstrated typical orc characteristics, including sallow or swart skin, bow-legged builds, and crude equipment. They received minimal provisions necessary for continued service. Despite their lower status, these orcs proved capable of basic craftsmanship, producing functional, though crude, implements and weapons. 2 individual orcs specifically named Snaga appear in records. One served in Isengard forces, while another operated in Mordor's armies. At the Tower of Cirith, Ungol, an orc called Snaga, was the final survivor after the garrison's internal conflict. The Snaga designation illustrated orc hierarchies where larger, stronger individuals dominated weaker kin through intimidation and violence. Lesser orcs endured this treatment, performing essential support functions, enabling orc armies to maintain extended campaigns across Middle-earth. Orc chieftains commanded warbands, garrisons, and military formations requiring demonstrated combat capability and sufficient cunning to maintain authority. These leaders occupied hierarchies' apex, serving Dark Lords, or maintaining independent power in lawless regions. Chieftains typically exceeded average orc dimensions, with some reaching or approaching man height. Physical dominance reinforced authority, though. Cunning and ruthlessness proved equally important. Chieftains received best available equipment, including quality armor, superior weapons, and symbolic regalia. Azog commanded Moria's orcs after Sauron's occupation, achieving notoriety through Thror's murder. He maintained authority through terror and combat prowess until Dain Ironfoot slew him at Azan-Albazar. His son Bolg subsequently led northern orcs to the Battle of Five Armies, meeting similar fate. The Great Goblin ruled Goblin Town, maintaining order through intimidation and arbitrary violence. Gandalf eliminated him during Thorin's company escape, triggering goblin mobilization. Grishnach commanded Mordor orcs in Ugluk's mixed war party, demonstrating typical chieftain ruthlessness before Rohirrim eliminated him. Shagrat and Gorbag commanded rival companies whose conflict at Cirith Ungol illustrated orc internal politics and inability to cooperate even under shared command. The huge orc chieftain, nearly man-high clad in black mail, who led the Chamber of Mazarbul assault, demonstrated elite warrior status. Successful chieftains balanced brutality, maintaining subordinate compliance with sufficient tactical competence, avoiding catastrophic defeats. Failure resulted in replacement through assassination or battlefield elimination. Orc hunters were orcs serving as hunters and scouts, tracking enemies across varied terrain. Tolkien references orc hunters in multiple contexts. During the First Age, an orc hunter band operated around Doriath, pursuing enemies through wilderness areas. In the Third Age, 2 orc hunters appeared near Cirith Ungol, searching for Frodo and Sam after their escape. One consisted of a large soldier orc, while the other demonstrated smaller build with tracking behaviors, including snuffling for scent trails. The tracker killed his companion with an arrow during their search. These orcs utilized enhanced sensory capabilities, particularly olfaction, for trail following. Smaller orcs often functioned in tracker roles, using size and agility advantages in pursuit operations. Orc hunter bands operated in small groups rather than large formations, emphasizing stealth and reconnaissance over direct combat. Dark Lords employed scouts and hunters for locating enemies, pursuing fugitives, and gathering intelligence. These operations required different skills than mass battlefield engagements. Orcs utilized for hunting typically received specialized tasking, though whether this represented formal breeding programs or simply assignment based on natural capabilities remains unclear. Hobgoblins appear once in The Hobbit in a throwaway line and were never clearly defined by Tolkien. A passage references goblins and hobgoblins without providing clear distinction between categories. Later correspondence from Tolkien in 1971 noted that calling hobgoblins a larger kind represented the reverse of what he had originally intended. This suggests the term, if meaning anything specific, might refer to smaller rather than larger orc variants, contrary to common assumption. Some secondary sources speculate that in the Hobbit's context, hobgoblins might loosely refer to larger soldier orcs, what later terminology would identify as Uruks. However, this remains entirely speculative. Tolkien never canonized hobgoblins as a distinct race or provided definitive characteristics, distinguishing them from standard orcs or goblins. The term likely represented casual word choice during the Hobbit's composition, rather than deliberate creation of a separate orc category. That's all for today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next one.